The most important text you can read when you want to study the Old Testament is, of course, the Old Testament. You just have to read it. I mean, there's so much said about the Bible and so little reading of the actual Bible that it could drive a person absolutely crazy when trying to have conversations about the Bible. You can't even have a basic conversation about the Bible with people because people don't know what they're talking about and say random things that they've heard on YouTube or somewhere, and it is quite frustrating indeed. I made a different video on 12 books plus some bonus picks on books you can read to really take your Old Testament study to the next level, to an intermediate level, especially if you consider yourself a beginner. In this video, and I'll link that below. In this video though, I want to I want to talk about, in this video, I'm linking below, right now I'm talking, and I want to talk about some resources that would help you go a lot deeper into your study of the Old Testament by way of primary sources. So the Old Testament is a primary source of its own type from the ancient world, of course. But I'd like to suggest a series of primary sources you might want to read, ancient texts from the world of the Bible, but that are not the Bible, that will really elevate your study and elevate your thinking about the Bible. And if nothing else, I mean, what these texts show you, and this is actually very profound, I think, what these texts show you, if you really take them in and if you read them, they show you how absolutely incredible and how absolutely weird the Bible is as a collected book. Just how long it is, and just how intense it is, right? And just how focused it is, even in its diversity, and even though it's flying all over the place with its books and its messages and its themes. I mean, by reading other ancient literature from the ancient Near Eastern world, from the ancient West Asian world, as some now call it, you're going to get a serious appreciation for what the Bible is in its ancient context. So without further ado, here are some resources that can help you do that. The most classic resource that people had for a long time was this thing, abbreviated ANET, A-N-E-T, for Ancient Near Eastern Texts, related to the Old Testament, edited by James Pritchard, who was a professor at the University of Pennsylvania for a long time. As a one-stop shop and a book that'll just make you feel like you're really studying ancient texts, I just love this book. I love the way the pages look. I love the way it feels in the hand. It's just a great book. Gotta love this book. It's not the most updated collection, though, of these types of translations. I think the thing that's sort of more or less taken its place is this 3-volume set called The Context of Scripture. The Context of Scripture, edited by William Hallow and K. Lawson Younger, Jr. I think they're the editors of all of them. Yes, they are. So it's expanded. It has more contemporary translations from lots of different scholars of a newer generation. The other one were translations from scholars of the older generation. They're both really good. I use both of them, but I mean, what do you get here? I mean, what do you not get? If you want to read ancient Egyptian prayers, if you want to read West Semitic inscriptions and Ugaritic texts, and what is this? Akkadian royal hymns, Sumerian. What is this one? What's in here? Oh, inscriptions from the biblical world, Hittite texts. You want to read Moabite texts. You want to read Ammonite inscriptions. You want to read monumental inscriptions. Egyptian, I mean, just context of Scripture really has it all. I think another place that's really handy for you to get writing from outside the Bible, and this particularly from ancient Israel, but not the Bible, is this book, Shmuel Achituv, Echoes from the Past, Hebrew and Cognate Inscriptions from the Biblical World. What I love about this book, and maybe I can show you a page so you can see it, is he's going to show you the inscriptions, but he's going to actually also give a better font typed out Hebrew letters there. So for people who maybe studied Hebrew, you can actually read it, whereas sometimes this is tough to read maybe for people. And then he's also going to give, not even so much, actually he gives translations beneath each of these, and then he gives philological notes beneath each of the translations. So you're going to be able to read things like the Arad Ostraca, for example, and the Lachish Ostraca, inscriptions from ancient Jerusalem, Ekron, just all over the place. So something like this is just fantastic. Now, Anybody who deals with the Old Testament is going to have to deal with the writings that came from an ancient coastal city called Ugarit on the northern coast in what is today Lebanon and Syria, up in that area. Okay, and that's just where we found the archive. But presumably the texts that we found there, hundreds, thousands of these little cuneiform alphabetic texts that were discovered, I think in the 1920s. These texts represent what some people think is something like a late Bronze Age Canaanite world out of which Israel emerged. So understanding Ugarit through a series like the SBL's Writing from the Ancient World series, Dennis Pardee, Ritual and Cult at Ugarit, or the Ugaritic narrative poetry edited by Simon Parker, but with translations by various people, you're going to get things like, if you want to read the Baal or the Baal epic, texts about Asherah and Anat, that's where you find this stuff. This is the best source for this kind of thing, closest chronologically and linguistically to ancient Israel. Ritual and Cult, find out about rituals and incantations and what this kind of world was that in some ways is parallel to some things in Leviticus or the Torah. So you're going to have to get into Ugarit. And what's even really nice about these, by the way, is that they contain parallel columns with the English translation, but then also with the Ugaritic language, transliterated into letters you can recognize at least. And so you can kind of follow along if you know Semitic languages, even a little bit. So Ugarit, you're going to have to do that. You might want to study comparative prophecy. Were there prophets in the ancient Near Eastern world outside of Israel? Oh yes, there were. You can read about them in something like this, Prophets and Prophecy in the Ancient Near East, again from this series, Writings from the Ancient World. I'll have links to all these, of course, down in the text description so you can find it. Prophetic texts from ancient Assyria and prophetic texts from Mari and other places really gives fascinating insight into just how long and intense the biblical prophetic books are, but you're also going to see some shared themes there, and you'll learn a lot. Probably good to have, I wanted to mention this. You can get these Old Testament, kind of like parallel texts or these ancient Near Eastern texts that I was mentioning in much shorter form too, not just the 3-volume thing, but like this, for example. There's an updated edition to this. I just don't have it on my bookshelf, but I have this older one. It's called Old Testament Parallels, Laws and Stories from the Ancient Near East, Victor Matthews and Don Benjamin. There are other versions of this like this too. So I don't mean to imply that you have to spend hundreds of dollars to get some 3-volume thing just to read these other ancient documents. You don't. Okay, just a couple more. 2 more actually. One, you want to be able to look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? You have to get some Dead Sea Scrolls. So you could get a collection like this, the Dead Sea Scrolls, a new translation with commentary, Michael Wise, Martin Abegg, Edward Cook. This would be one example of something like this that you could get. Or if you really wanted to get intense, you could get this 2-volume study edition, right? Which is going to give you Hebrew or Aramaic on one side and the translation on the other. So that's really nice to be able to study the Dead Sea Scrolls and be able to use those and see what's going on there. And then finally, I would recommend this, and actually this isn't very expensive, I don't think, the 2-volume James Charlesworth edited Old Testament pseudepigrapha, right? These are thick, these are huge. This has everything like the books of Enoch, for example, which have become very popular lately because people are obsessed with spirits and demons and giants. Works like Jubilees, very, very influential in early Judaism and early Christianity even. Letter of Aristeas, Psalms of Solomon, just all kinds of things. These would be like, shorthand, these would be like writings that occurred between roughly the time of the Old Testament and the time of the New Testament by mostly Jewish authors. So to see the way that the religion and the literature developed after the Old Testament, just super valuable. All right, so that would be a kind of a starter kit with some volumes that I think are approachable. And who knows, maybe if one of these things interests you, go and take a chance and buy it and see what happens.